Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Black Mental Health Matters. I'm Dr. Carrie-Ann Williams, and this is a talk show that's about everything related to mental wellness in the Black community. If you have a question or comment throughout the show, just drop it in the comment section. I'll be able to see that and respond if needed. On today's show, I have with me a special guest, Dr. Oneeka Williams. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Carrie-Ann. Thank you for having me on again.
So, Dr. Anika Williams is a positivity catalyst. She's an award-winning author, a storyteller, a speaker, a teacher, and a urologic surgeon. She's a director of female urology at Emerson Urology in Concord, Massachusetts. And she's an assistant clinical professor of urology at Tufts Medical Center. She does mentoring to girls and students. She's a leader in multiple community organizations. And she has a book series for children called Dr. Dynamo, a super surgeon on the go, which features a brown girl protagonist who is using magical hands and the power of positivity. And she kind of integrates concepts of science and technology and engineering and the arts and mathematics, as well as creative adventures, and promotes literacy in children. Dr. Williams has a podcast called Positivity Pause. And today we're going to be talking about her new book, Not Today Negativity, 5 Habits of Positivity to Cope, Hope, and Be Well in Tough Times. And I've read this book and I'm so excited to have my own Meet the Author experience. So thank you again for coming on the show, Dr. Williams.
Thank you. Thank you once again. Hi, everybody.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and what your inspiration was for writing this book.
Oh, I feel like it could take forever to talk about myself, but what I would first say is that, I am really just a product of God's goodness, His grace, and His mercy. And I truly stand on the shoulders of those who have, spoken into my life, who have believed in me, who have, contributed messages that helped me to see things about myself when I couldn't see it for myself. And that's kind of one of the things that, as I developed the Dr. Dynamo book series, is about how do I help to speak into the lives of young girls, of kids of color, to believe in the impossible. And so I was born in Guyana. My grandmothers, women of great strength with very little education, but just committed, that deep belief in God, and hard workers. My dad, a journalist, but who had to finish school, who had to leave school in his early teens to help work to support his family, but yet and still continued to pursue excellence and became, just a very, very proficient and incredible author. My mom wanted to be a doctor, but her parents couldn't afford to send her to medical school. And so she became this passionate science teacher who continues to seed and sow into the lives of young children. And that's what she did with me, is to sow into me this love of science, this love of medicine, this love of learning. And so I have this combination of the journalist and the storyteller and the educator. And so I say that I am, a product of the Caribbean, born in Guyana, raised in Barbados, with a deep belief in the power of my story and the power of stories to educate, to teach in whatever setting, to elevate, to help people to rise above their circumstances, and then to empower them to take action.
Wow. And I'd say I'm so thankful for your life and for your following God's leading in your life. And I wonder, there's kind of this kind of step between kind of knowing your purpose and living the purpose. For you, how did you, I guess, go through that process in your busy life of kind of saying, you know what, I am busy, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to write this book. How long did it take you to do it?
Anytime you write a book, Carrie-Ann, it is a journey. And this has truly been a journey that has evolved. And I would have to say one of the things that you mentioned, and as I said before, is having this connection to this divine center, which is God for me, and how so often we get these messages, we get these situations that nothing is by accident. And we just have to have those points of connection where we can really hear the voice in terms of where we're being led. I connected to the fact that I wanted to be a doctor very, very early on. And I have this whole story, which, people will read in the book about having an incident in a classroom with one of my classmates who was injured, and me feeling this immediate pull towards being the person to help her. And in that moment, having this sense of rightness that this is what I wanted to do. And then having to overcome a number of hurdles because as a girl, the subject that I needed, physics, was not available to me because I was in an all girls school, and somehow the determination was made that girls didn't do physics, girls weren't good at physics. And the process that I had to go through with the support of my parents advocating, with the support of teachers who, even though they themselves had been brought up in the status quo, were open to the notion that they could do things differently, and that were supportive of having someone who was breaking the status quo, who was going to be a trailblazer, and wanting to see that change. And so I was really the beneficiary of those types of philosophies and that type of support. So that purpose and that sense of I want to be a doctor, I want to take care of people, never wavered. And aligned with that, as I began to unpack a lot more about what did that mean for me as I went through very rigorous training in a predominantly almost all white male specialty, and all of the twists and turns to be able to still stay centered in what God had called me to be, and then getting to that point where I had completed the training, I was in practice, I was doing the thing that I had spent 15 years of my life training to do, had become good at it. It filled, the sense that I was really making a difference and changing lives and engaging with people when they were at their most vulnerable, and recognizing the ministry in that. Yet there was still a feeling that there was more, that there was something more that I needed to do, that my life, that my experiences were meant to not just through my day to day one on one care of my patients, but that there was more that I needed to do to bring this next generation along, to encourage, to empower. And that message was not clear, like, oh, here it is. I mean, it was that feeling, gosh, there's more, and exploring and searching and praying, and sister groups. I mean, I have had so many sister prayer groups where, we've convened around this pursuit of purpose and prayerfully just seeking after what is it that is, God's calling, additional calling in our lives. And I was volunteering with these young girls in science club at our church, Myrtle Baptist Church, and I'm, very, very blessed to be part of, two really amazing church communities. And we had this science club for girls chapter that was started at the church. And as I was doing this activity that was about bringing them into the physiology of the heart and how the heart worked, and I had brought this creative storytelling, my wild imagination, into creating an analogy for them, equating the circulatory system to the New York subway station, and with the heart as Grand Central. And in that moment, I saw the spark of understanding go up in their eyes. It was like, oh, wow, it's that simple? And yes, it was that simple. And that was the aha moment that inspired me to know that I could use my imagination, my ability to create stories, my ability to construct complicated and complex concepts, which I do every day with my patients. When I'm explaining to patients things about their various diagnoses and how things work and how medicines work and what the surgeries are going to do to help them, I have to simplify it and break it down in a way that they can easily understand. I have to capture their stories, listen to what they've said to me, craft it into a story that I could then communicate, pull it all together. I do that day in and day out. So that was the aha moment that said to me, I could use what I had been doing all along, I could use this gift of creating stories and use it in a way to integrate not just the concepts of science, but then this important work of messaging. Because the reason that we started the Science Club was because, or the chapter at our church, was because there was such a woeful lack of representation of women in STEM field. Girls, by the time they were 6, did not believe that they could pursue careers that required brilliance. So there was a messaging that had been happening in the lives of our young girls. We didn't have a strong female superhero girl character, brown girl character, that communicated that there's nothing that you can't do. And oh, by the way, there were only 3% of books that were published in the year 2012 that had characters, protagonists, lead characters of color.
Yeah.
So all of that kind of wrapped into, here is an opportunity for me to use what I know, right from a place that I know, my love of science, being a surgeon, having taken this journey where I had had through all of the various opportunities and people pouring into me, and what are those components and factors that really help our children to believe and our girls to believe that they could do it. So that was the inspiration for writing. And as I said, coming out of a history, of a family history, of an environment where we lived writing and storytelling and meeting people and science education. So it was a very, very natural place for me to land.
Wow, wow. And so you have this children's book series, and then you decide to write a book for kind of for the adults that are thinking, hey, I like this children's series. Is there a version for me? Tell us about what your book is about, and who it's written for.
As I mentioned earlier, in this place of journey in evolution, and when I created Dr. Didi Dynamo as a girl super surgeon who has these powers of positivity, and broke down these 5 habits that really are the underpinnings of a process by which she approaches this can do, I can, no problem is too big or small. Dr. Didi Dynamo can tackle them all. There's always a solution. As I began to do that work and speak around the country, the first thing that I understood clearly is that for our children to believe in themselves, to believe what is possible, parents or caretakers, we are literally our children's first superheroes. We are our children's first farmers. We are our children's first teachers. And when you think about how the brain wires and all the encoding that happens, it happens within those first 5 years. Those messages are so incredibly important. And so I began to understand, even as I looked at how much money up until the point that I had started writing had been invested in STEM for girls, cultivating, exposing programs for STEM. And yet the needle had not moved in terms of the representation of women in STEM fields, in terms of the representation of underrepresented minorities in STEM fields. So what that communicated to me is that there was more than just, oh, let's just give you the information, let's surround you by, the content, let's engage you in the learning process. There is a mindset. There is, what do I believe is possible? Do I still believe, despite being surrounded by all of these opportunities, do I believe that I belong here? Do I believe that I can do it? And I think it is so incredibly important for parents to have that language to model. It's not so much what we tell our children, but it's what they see. And so, speaking around the country, having parents ask me about, oh, can you tell me more about those habits? And making the connection between mindset, between what our children believe and what we believe, made it clear to me that I needed to write the adult version of the book to really guide parents and anyone really interacting with young people to be able to guide them through this process for themselves so that they could then impart it on their children. And so that's how it started. And the evolution in terms of what it became in its totality was that journey of being able to really understand and then to connect to the power of my own story, the healing power of my story, because so often we push through our lives. We just, we take one hit after the next, and we just keep going. And we don't really stop many times to really process, to really understand what our experiences have been, and to be able to extract from those experiences the power within them. The power not only as we process and release that there's healing in that, but the power to understand how our stories can touch the lives of others, can create paths of understanding for others, can create liberation for ourselves and for others. And so I became quite inspired, especially during the pandemic. And I made that connection between this not today negativity that we're so surrounded by all of these negative messages, negative images that consume us. 80% of our thoughts during the day are negative ones. And so, how do we take control through an awareness and through an intentionality to say, not today, that I am going to choose to extract the things that add to me and not be enslaved by the things that take away from me?
And I think one of the things that I appreciate about the book are actually the personal stories that you share. Because what I think is, I guess for me, it lends credibility. Because sometimes when we read about the positive psychology, we look at the speaker and we think, what problems do you have? Of course, you can talk about being positive. I don't know if you've really experienced much. And when I
Yes.
read your stories, I think, wow, the power to be positive in the face of these real challenges, it
Yes.
lends credibility that your philosophy works.
Yes.
What was it like for you to share these personal stories in a book?
It was really, really difficult. And this is another divine moment because I am intensely personal, a private. I am very much a product of our culture where we don't tell all our business. And that vulnerability was something that was very, very foreign to me. Indeed, it really was that place of liberation and freedom for me in the process of both connecting to my story and sharing my story. And one of the things that I remember when I started writing the Dr. Didi Dynamo series, I had a woman by the name of Joan Holman who helped me develop kind of a digital footprint. How do I think about social media and marketing and marketing books. She was a kind of an online social media marketing person, and I have a great friend Angela Pitter who was with me from the beginning. But one of the things Joan kept saying to me, she said, people are going to want to know who Dr. Oneeka Williams is. And at that point, I had created Dr. Didi Dynamo. She was this incredible manifestation of everything that I believed in and I hold dear, but she was a comfortable place for me to hide behind. And so I didn't want to put Dr. Oneeka Williams out there. I wanted Dr. Didi Dynamo to be front and center. I wanted her to be the focus. I wanted her fantastical, life with all of the incredible messages to be the thing that led. and I did not want to be the face of Dr. Didi Dynamo. And over the years, you know, the same message kept coming back, is that people want to know, they're going to connect to you. They want to know what it is that helps you to get to the point where you can create a character like Dr. Didi Dynamo. And so it was that, just gradual evolution. And I think that the thing that made it most poignant for me was the pandemic. The experiences during the pandemic was really that, the impetus, the real driver to really, kind of come to the point of acceptance that I had to share my stories. And that in the sharing of the stories, so many of the stories that I had not even taken the time to really, really, really even to connect to my pain in it. That process was very, very healing. Was very healing for me. So it was painful. It was very uncomfortable, but it was almost as if, I couldn't get to the next step of how big this message will be until I was able to take the step of being vulnerable and modeling that. So many times there's so much shame that is associated with whether it's infertility or whether you're treated in as less than, in a very toxic environment, and we internalize so much of that to feel as if it's somehow a reflection on us. And being able to release the power when you're able to say, this has happened to me, but I own my story. My story does not own me. And that out of this, I come out stronger. I come out more empowered. I come out, wiser. I come out with a degree of faith that I actually have the ability to use my experiences to elevate myself and others. And I don't allow what is the perception of these negative associations to dominate and to control my life. And if we have the ability to step above our stories and actually understand that they are meant to serve us, I think that we come into this place of real liberation. And then we come into this place of being of gratitude, of being able to appreciate, especially as you are able to look back and you said, wow, I could not be in this position where I can now be a catalyst for change for others had I not gone through these things and then been, really kind of tumbled and have it, kind of pounded out of me to now get to this place of comfort and understanding that I don't have to hold these things inside, that it's not a reflection of something wrong that I have done, but that it's part of a process that is really part of what is our purpose. And so in that recognition, and I think that within the book, I've talked about purpose. We've used that word a couple times during this conversation, purpose. And so many of us kind of get so hung up on, what is my purpose? Do I know my purpose? And sometimes it even becomes paralyzing, because if you feel like you just don't know your purpose, then you feel like you can't get off of first base. And what I have realized through all of my experiences is that purpose is really about assignment. What is the assignment in the moment? What is the assignment in the present? What were the assignment in those experiences? And so as I look at my life, as I look at the stories that have been the accumulation of so many of my life paths, I recognize that each assignment had a purpose to it. And if I accept and embrace wholeheartedly the assignment, then the purpose of the assignment aligns with what I have been created to do.
Wow, that's really powerful. And one of the things you said that kind of stood out to me is this idea that you own your story. Your story does not own you. And I think And the work that I do, I see so often that that's something people grapple with is their life experiences own them. And when they are able to kind of get to a point where they can own their story, it's a transformational experience for them.
Yes, yes,
So,
absolutely.
and I wonder, as you kind of share your stories, I know that I know that your bravery in sharing your stories was helpful for me. And I wonder what's the response that you get from other readers? Do they, what kind of feedback have you gotten about your work?
You're absolutely, spot on, Carrie Ann. I've had so many people that have been inspired and encouraged by the courage. And I remember one of my friends called me and she was crying. And I had had her read the book before I actually released it. And she said that she had been dealing, and this is someone who is in the psychological, world, psychology. And she said that she had been dealing with just fear, and that this book, she thanked me. She thanked me for having the courage to step outside of my fear, to really defeat, to say, not today to fear, to be able to rise above it and not be controlled and intimidated to the degree where, we can't walk in whatever it is that we're called to do. And so it has been liberating. I have had so many people who have said, who have connected to the positivity part of it. And what I love about the book is that not today negativity like it sticks in your head. Like you can say not today negativity and have it be very clear that you're setting an intention about what you're not going to do. And because the habits have been clearly described as a process, so many times we get caught up in positivity as denial or rose-colored glasses, and people don't really know how to do positivity. They think positivity means that you just say, "Oh, everything is just going to be fine. Everything is going to be fine," and that it doesn't feel attainable. It doesn't feel tangible. It doesn't feel doable because it just feels like you're glossing things over. And what this book offers is not a blind positivity. It's not the toxic positivity, but it offers a process. It offers a way of approaching your life. It offers a way of approaching your challenges and experiences where if you deconstruct your issues based on a framework, and it's a framework that is, what do you believe? I mean, ultimately, everything in our life has to do with what we believe. What we believe, our thoughts, which then manifest into our words. Like you first have to have a thought to be able to then have the words. So you are creative. We have this power of creation and really creating a reality. And so what we believe frames everything, because if you believe that there is a solution to every problem, and it's not a blind belief, but it is grounded in what is the Latin derivation of the word solution. It means solute as the root of the word. It means to untie. It means to untie a knot. So anytime you are confronted with a problem and you are in pursuit of the solution, your focus is really the process of getting to the solution. It is not always about the end point. Mostly it is about what is that process that helps you to untie the issue, that helps you to learn about tapping into resources, about networking, about critical thinking, about digging below the surface, about being open-minded, about entertaining various thoughts and input, about seeking wise counsel, about being resilient, about being able to be persistent. I mean, there's so many things that come along with untying that problem that really helps you to believe that if I know that there is a solution because I'm going to go through this process to pursue that which will help me to derive what are the teaching moments of this problem. If you believe that, then you approach your problem with a degree of empowerment, right? It's like, I know I'm going, like I have no doubt that I am going to learn something, that this solution and this process of getting to the solution is going to serve me. And it really impacts on how we show up. And so many people who have read the book have said, wow, when I think about it like that, it frames it so differently. And one of the things that I really, really enjoyed about writing the book is still being who I am in terms of using my creative gifts to create analogies that help people to connect to how this process shows up in their lives. And so I had a book club the other day, and some of the women said that they really connected to this notion of the pendulum, swinging, like what is it that centers you? What is at your center? And choosing that center and knowing that life is going to swing you from off center. It is the nature of the life that we live. But we get to choose the center. And in choosing the center and in getting grounded, that the swings and the extremes of the swings become less and less because we're very intentional. And the more that you practice a way of thinking framed in these 5 simple principles, the more it becomes second nature, the more it becomes the top of mind, the way you think about it, so that it doesn't mean, I still have times when I swing, I get into situations, as you can imagine, as a Black female urologist, where every day I am confronted with situations where microaggressions, macroaggressions, where really are designed to take away. And so much of it, unfortunately, is unconscious, right? This is what we deal with, these implicit biases, these unconscious responses. And so I have to be very conscious about not allowing that to make me swing to an extreme where it creates physical hardship and it erodes my physiology. And so the awareness, the consciousness that we have the ability to be very clear in terms of how we are training our physiology to not be battered from place to place and side to side. And so that pendulum analogy really resonated with so many people. The treasure chest is one of the analogies that I use when I speak to students because it gives you a very concrete understanding that as our children, we are born with all of this amazing treasure. And there are things that we go through where people will try to dump nonsense and garbage into our treasure chest. We as parents, or we as caretakers or teachers or adults in children's lives, in the lives even of our co-workers, we can put things into the treasure chest that help to add value, that help to help ourselves and our children to identify our worth, to really elevate our self-esteem. Those things that are already there, but we're charged with helping to uncover them in the people in our lives. And that for children is very concrete. And so even as we engage with the young people in our lives, if we can think about everything that we say, we have an opportunity to put treasure in their chest that is really just expanding their sense of worth, and to have a process that we learn as we get older to filter what people put in our chest. So we have the habits of positivity filter, and we can clearly identify that does not belong in my chest. It's not the solution to a problem. It is not helping me to convert a limit into an opportunity. It is not adding to me. It is not helping me to see that I am divinely created with a purpose that is linked to caring for someone. And it's not helping me to come to this place of gratitude. And if in your filter you apply whatever the situation is to that filter and it doesn't pass muster, it does not go into your treasure chest. So having all of those types of analogies and those frameworks have allowed people to connect to it in various ways. And so the response that I have gotten, so many people who have read the book, has been overwhelmingly positive. And even in the places where I have had some negative reviews, the reviews that is so funny to me because we're always grappling with, well, where does this book belong? What box does it belong in? And it's the same that we try to do. People try to do it for me. People try to do it for all of us. It's like, well, you are X and you're defined by you're a surgeon or you're a mom or you're a wife or you're a scientist or you're one thing and you can't be this multidimensional person. And so for the book, it falls into spirituality, it falls into health, it falls into self-help, it falls into memoir. And so for people who, on Amazon saw that self-help title and read it, and they're like, well, I don't really think this is a self-help book. It doesn't really fit the code, the self-help category. And which everyone has an opinion, and I recognize and I respect that. But even as that person wrote that review, at the end of it, what she said was that she couldn't put the book down because she was captivated by the stories and that she will always remember the stories. And one of the things that keeps playing in her head that she has now adopted is not today negativity. And it brought me, I was amused because I said, this is precisely when we say not today negativity, despite the fact that this person having this limited perspective about what she thought the book should be, yet and still the purpose and the mission of the book had been accomplished without her even knowing it.
I think that's amazing. And I want to say, I want to share a few words about what I thought about the book, because that was actually one of the things that I thought about. I said, but I thought of it as a positive, but I can see how from a book kind of selling place, they might kind of be confused. But I remember thinking this crosses the boundaries of a kind of a personal memoir, kind of like a autobiography and a self-help book. And I saw it as a positive. And I said to myself, I was reading this and I said, okay, it's the stories you share are real personal stories, which, the time that they happened are very painful. But I feel like you're able to kind of share the stories in such a way that we could connect to them at a real level, but it was also shared in a way that could be entertaining so that we could enjoy reading them. And what I thought to myself was, sometimes when people share their personal stories, they're so heavy that I read it once and I think, I don't want to read that again.
Yes.
But this is written in such a way that I could reread these stories. And again, I could connect to them without feeling weighed down by them.
Yes.
And I appreciated that there was kind of that readability to the book. So I could read through the book, initially one time and get the kind of the main concepts, but I can go back and I can reread each chapter in more depth a second time. And you mentioned there's all these different concepts and pearls. And if you go through the book and read each chapter in depth, I can reflect on it and I can pick which ones stand out the most to me. And is it the pendulum? Is it the treasure chest? Is it the life fabric? Is it this? Is it that? And I can sit and reflect, whether personally or in a group. And there's just so much in this book that I would have to go through it more than one time to really get everything out of it. And the stories, it's so interesting because, again, they're really things that happen to you. But by the time I got to the Jim Jones story, I was just like, okay, I'm done. Like, this is too much. This is way too much. I've got to close this book. And then I turned the page and you acknowledge that this might seem kind of unreal. I'm like, so you know,
Yes.
you know that
Yes.
there's aspects of this that are just like unbelievable.
Yes. Yes.
But again, these things really happen. And I think, again, the courage that you had to share this kind of unbelievable kind of stories that have happened in your life, I think it benefits us as a reader. It's also entertaining, even though we know that at the time it would have been more difficult or more painful. We appreciate you sharing them. And again, I think your skill in sharing them in a way that doesn't kind of push the reader away or kind of make us feel heavy, but in a way that we can kind of partially even enjoy reading the twists and the turns and like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened when the phone rang and you got this news, and oh my gosh, and but at the same time, there's something we could take away from the book. So it's not just your story, but all of the habits and the kind of the thoughts for reflection and ways that then, okay, how can we experience some of these successes in our own lives? I really appreciate that, and I feel like it's a book that almost anyone can connect to.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Thank you so much, Carrie Ann. And I actually, when it is mind-boggling, and as I said, sometimes you go through life and you're just going from one thing to the next. And this notion of mindfulness and really being present, because when I sat and began to write, I was like, oh my goodness, this is a mini series. I mean, I've actually had friends who have read it who said, this is like you need, and that is actually one of my projects that I'm
it can be
believing will
adapted. This can be
yeah.
adapted into, because I'm thinking, I was reading it at the end, I was like, this is something that could completely be adapted into something made for TV.
Yes, yes, and to tell you, and and it's not even it's not even
I will
half
speak
of,
it into
not even
existence.
half.
I will speak it into existence.
Yes, thank you, thank you. But it's such, thank you so much, thank you so much. I mean, that blesses me. This has been really a privilege and an honor to write this book, to have just the divine, guidance and the support of so many incredible people. I mean, I have to tell you, and this is the reason that I can stand here. I remember having a conversation with one of my Link sisters about telling her about some of the stories in the book. And she said to me, she said, oh my goodness, I mean, you walk through life with such grace and such joy that I would never have imagined that these were your experiences. And I think it is really when I speak about that unlimited within us that we really, I mean, like if you are connected to God that is about all things working together for good, that despite whatever you go through will never leave you or forsake you, that that in it, even as you look back, you can still find the periods of joy. I have been so incredibly blessed in so many ways. And I think I was telling my husband the other day, my he and I will have been married for 30 years actually in 2022. And I've been so incredibly blessed to have not just parents who have been huge supporters and advocates and all of the things of who I am is part of who they are, but to have in-laws, both my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, who believe in me. And my father-in-law is deceased, but he was Jamaican. And it's like, sure, my husband said to me just the other day, he said, like, you and my father would be the only two people who would understand what you're talking about, because I have this big vision. I'm always kind of thinking and making these connections. And his dad was just like that, always kind of big dreamer and always had these ways of connecting a million different dots. And he said, and to hear that reminded me of the blessing of literally having almost two sets of parents that believed in me, that my mother-in-law, even if she visits, will still say to me, oh my God, you're so amazing. Like, what you're doing is so powerful. This is such a ministry. And then godparents and aunts and grandparents and friends and sister friends. So none of this happens alone and in isolation. And it speaks to the importance of community. And so when in one of the book, the sections of the book, when I talk about this kind of redefining super, what are our superpowers and where our superpowers come from, and the notion of self-care, this the importance of how we care for ourselves, and we tap into this unlimited supply that is because we have an unlimited source, and these powers and these habits of positivity, and then this ecosystem, which is about living with this understanding that we are interconnected, and that being in community is so incredibly important, because the times when you feel down, or the times when you think, God, I can't do this, you have, women and men and family members and clergy and teachers who are there supporting you and speaking into you and encouraging you. And that's where the real kind of wind beneath your wings happens. And so it's been such an incredible blessing for me to be in community, so that when I look back at these painful things and these things that I have encountered, I cannot help but pull out, the time of the trauma after trauma with Mark and with Matthew, and getting to that period, that point of being able to have this child, the church aunts and the Myrtle Baptist community, the Pentecostal Tabernacle community, the people who showed up with food, who called, who prayed. I mean, like, how can I, look back at these things and just be seated and stay embedded and buried by the pain of it, when there were so many blessings in spite of even if things didn't work out the way that you wanted it to. Surrounding you were all of these other ways that God's provision became so clear, the abundance became so clear, that this is why I am able to write from this place of not it being so weighty, because I could connect to, I mean, the joy in so many parts of the experience. And it's a journey, right? I still, it took me, I could hardly talk about my delivery experience for a long time, because I would just cry. It was painful. So it's not to deny the pain, it's not to deny the loss, but it is to acknowledge that even in those periods of pain and even in the loss, there's so many other value added. There's so much other provision. There's so much love. There's so much abundance. There's so much faith, that to only focus on the one thing, the loss, and not see how, because of that experience, it uncovered all of these other blessings in your life. Um, I would be just flying in the face of God. And so it is that process and that journey that allows me to communicate, these experiences, and to acknowledge that I have to tell you, I go back to this assignment and purpose, because what I do on a day-to-day basis, even in the face of all of the pandemic and the racial, the racism and the sexism and the misogyny, and um, all of those painful things, I still come back to the center of the assignment and of the privilege that I have of being able to use my gift to change people's lives, to heal, and to know that my healing doesn't just happen in my physical laying on of hands, but in the way that I communicate, in the way that I share my story, in the way that I encourage, are all part of this healing work that I have been assigned to. And so I take that seriously. It brings me immense joy. And I have been just incredibly blessed. And I think when you can, this having this process helps you so much to really connect to the not today negativity. And, I could tell you story after story after story. I had a patient come in the other day, and I had operated on him for a particular problem related to this painful bladder, urgency, frequency, going to the bathroom, every 20 to 30 minutes. I did this procedure, and he was going to the bathroom during the day, maybe every 3 hours, but was still having some of the issue at night, every 30 minutes to an hour at night. And so when he came in to see me, he was like, nothing's changed. I'm still getting up, but every 30 minutes at night, it still hurts, and so on and so forth. And so I listened. And so I then said, okay, let's untie the problem. How often are you going during the day? Oh, every 3 hours. But you were going every 30 minutes during the day. Oh, that's much better. That's much better. It's not the daytime's not the problem, like just the nighttime. And what it reminded me is that negativity is like a spoiled child. It likes to be the center of attention. It literally wants to capture all of the attention, will have a tantrum if all of the attention is not focused on it. Wants to be that center of attention. And so we have to be very mindful. We have to see it. We have to call it out like, no, not today. You are not the center of attention. You will not be the spoiled child trying to literally throw everything and everybody, out of kilter because you're not getting what you want. Nope, not today. And that was, so I chuckled. So I said to him, I said, look at how well you are doing. Remember what this used to be like during the day? And it was in bringing him back to that center of acknowledging you are so much better. And let's work. Now we still have some work to do. And we're going to try to figure out what we can do to make your nighttime better. But you have improved, that your life and the quality of your life has improved, have improved considerably. So it's just that reminder. Negativity, if you let it, will suck all of the air out of the room.
Wow. And I like one of the things that stood out to me in the book was when you mentioned that we're often held, and there's a quote I have, we're often held captive by our problems because we believe that problems and negativity are partners. And I think that is so true. It's kind of like this idea that you can have a problem without having negativity is very difficult for us.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed it. I was very much looking forward to it for a long time, and I'm glad that I was able to make it happen. I encourage folks, definitely read the book, find out what the 5 habits are. They're in there in detail. They're amazing, and just, I don't know, I'd say just heart-touching stories about things that have happened in Dr. Williams's life. And how they tie into how she's used the habits of positivity to kind of help get through them. And I also I love that you mentioned vulnerability as a superpower. And it's interesting because I hadn't even made that connection that the work that you do in urology, that's such an area of vulnerability for us. Like no one wants to talk about urologic problems. It's not the most popular area of medicine, but it is just it's so it to me it made sense that kind of experiencing and witnessing that kind of vulnerability was part of your life's calling.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Carrie Ann. And if I could leave the audience with this one thing, is that this takes work. This is an everyday, this is a decision. It's a choice that we make. And so you'll find exercises within the books. I'm working on various workbooks so that there are ways to be able to kind of journal, on a day-to-day basis. But it really requires that attention, it requires the decision, and it requires the commitment to do this every day. And if you go through the exercises, and each chapter literally stands on its own. And so you could choose to just focus on one chapter, on the analogy that works for you, that resonates most with you, and then just do that work of doing it every day. And you will be amazed at how this becomes a part of your language. It becomes a part of your thought process. It becomes a part of your mindset. And the connection here is really about this and our health, because ultimately the work that we do, both Carrie Ann, all physicians and physicians of color, is about how are we going to disrupt these disparities in health? How are we going to optimize our health and well-being for communities of color, for Black people in this country? And it really, really, we're doing all the external work, but the internal work that helps us to mitigate this fight, this constant fight or flight response, this constant stress, this constant being on high alert. We have to begin to do the work, the self work of managing and disciplining our thoughts, our internal environment to be able to not swing so to such extremes that it continually erodes and weathers our physiology. So I encourage you all and to know that each of you has the ability to be a catalyst for change. We're all positivity catalysts. And so this work of not transforming you into something else, but literally uncovering what is already within you. A catalyst doesn't change doesn't add anything new. It just accelerates what is already within. And so for me, it's not trying to make you into something different. It's not trying to pull, put something new in you. It is literally recognizing that we all have everything that we need to be successful, meaning to show up mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, intellectually healthy so that we can do what we were called to do. We can use our gifts and talents to make a difference in this world. And so if we have that be the focus of how do we just accelerate conversion of what is already within us through a simple word, our superpowers, which are about helping to create change. It's just about that impact, making that difference. Sometimes it's a simple smile, a simple word of encouragement, a simple, meal to the neighbor's house. Simple acts of kindness have the ability to be catalysts of change. So we all have it. You have it. Be a part of the positivity posse, as I said, become a positivity catalyst, join this movement, and keep looking out for all of the things that are coming down the pipe in the island of positivity. We haven't even really talked about that as that space, but it still becomes that construct and that framework in our minds. You can create it for yourself. And so I hope that you will join me on this mission, join the movement along with all of the other kind of spokes that come off of this wheel that you will hear a lot more about. Listen to the Positivity Pause podcast, get to the Island of Positivity website, buy your Island of Positivity Spa gift set for, just giving a gift of positivity. I could go on and on and on, but I'm thrilled to be here. I feel like I'm just so incredibly blessed to have this voice and to encourage all of you to use your voices because they're powerful and they can make a difference in the lives of those around you.
Oh, thank you. Guys, check out Dr. Williams' website, check out her book, check out her podcast, Positivity Pause. And thanks for joining me today for Black Mental Health Matters. I will be back on the show again in another couple of weeks. I'll see all you guys in the new year. We'll take a couple of weeks off for Christmas and New Year's. I'll be back in January. So if you have any other comments or questions, you can still drop them in the comment box and I'll get them after the show is done. And so have a good Christmas. Bye, everybody.
And thank you so much for the work you're doing, Carrie Ann. Amazing commitment and amazing opportunities to really create change and drive impact. So thank you for your amazing work as well.
Thanks.